Good morning, and welcome to this special news report covering the most significant developments in U.S. financial markets, U.S. politics, and global events over the past few days. I'm Natasha, and we'll dive into the stories shaping the world with a critical eye on what's driving these changes. Let's get started. U.S. financial news, tariffs and market turmoil. The biggest financial story dominating U.S. markets is President Donald Trump's aggressive tariff policies, dubbed Liberation Day, which have sent shockwaves through Wall Street and global markets. Over the past 3 days, the S&P 500 dropped more than 2.3%, the Nasdaq fell 2.5%, and the Dow Jones Industrial Average plummeted nearly 2.4%, shedding almost 1,000 points in a single session. All S&P 500 sectors were in the red, driven by fears over Trump's tariff regime and his public threats to undermine Federal Reserve independence. The U.S. has imposed a 125% reciprocal tariff on Chinese imports, a 20% tariff tied to the fentanyl crisis, and Section 301 tariffs ranging from 7.5% to 100% on specific goods. China retaliated, raising duties on U.S. goods to 125% from 84%. Reports suggest Beijing may have instructed Chinese airlines to halt deliveries of U.S.-made planes, though this remains unconfirmed. These tit-for-tat measures have escalated fears of a full-blown trade war, with global finance leaders converging in Washington to negotiate trade deals amid the chaos. Gold prices surged to $3,500 per ounce as investors fled to safe haven assets, while U.S. bonds and the dollar faced scrutiny. Some analysts warn that Trump's policies, coupled with erratic moves like pushing to acquire Greenland or suggesting Canada become the 51st state, may erode global confidence in U.S. financial stability. However, Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent remains optimistic, claiming progress on trade deals and dismissing concerns about foreign investors dumping U.S. bonds. Critically, these tariffs could raise costs for American consumers and disrupt supply chains, especially in industries like solar energy, where new duties as high as 3,521% on Southeast Asian imports threaten renewable development. On the flip side, domestic manufacturers may benefit, but the broader economic impact remains uncertain. Are these moves a bold strategy to protect U.S. interests, or a reckless gamble risking recession? The markets are voting with their feet, and the answer may depend on how far this trade war escalates. Elsewhere, a U.S. bank regulator announced plans for a 20% staff reduction, signaling potential shifts in financial oversight, though details are sparse. This comes as Trump pressures Federal Reserve Chairman Jerome Powell to cut interest rates, a move that sparked immediate Wall Street sell-offs. The interplay between political pressure and monetary policy is a story to watch closely. U.S. political news, Trump's executive actions and Fed tensions in U.S. politics. President Trump's actions continue to dominate headlines. On April 20th, just hours after his inauguration, Trump signed an executive order tasking the Attorney General to investigate the Justice Department and other agencies for evidence of political weaponization. This move aligns with his campaign, promises to root out perceived biases but raises questions about the independence of federal institutions. Critics argue it could be a pretext for purging dissent, while supporters see it as a necessary step to restore trust. Trump's public feud with Federal Reserve Chairman Jerome Powell has intensified, with the president calling Powell names and demanding lower interest rates. Trump administration economist Kevin Hassett hinted that Powell's removal is under consideration, a move that could undermine the Fed's autonomy and further rattle markets. This tension highlights a broader struggle. Can the Fed maintain its independence under political pressure, or are we witnessing a shift toward greater executive control over monetary policy? The stakes are high, as investor confidence hinges on stability. Additionally, Vice President J.D. Vance's 4-day trip to India starting around April 20th has political and economic implications. Vance is negotiating to shield India from U.S. tariffs and strengthen bilateral ties, a sign of Trump's selective approach to trade partners. Meanwhile, domestic legal battles persist, with the Fourth Circuit ruling against the Trump administration in a case involving immigration policy, underscoring ongoing conflicts between the executive and judiciary. These stories reflect a presidency moving at breakneck speed, reshaping institutions and challenging norms. Whether this is disruption or destruction depends on your perspective, but the pace of change is undeniable. World news, Pope Francis's death and geopolitical shifts. On the global stage, the death of Pope Francis on April 21st at age 88, following a stroke and heart failure, has reverberated across the world. The spiritual leader of 1.5 billion Catholics, Francis was celebrated for his progressive stance, embracing the poor and marginalized. His funeral is set for Saturday in St. Peter's Square, with world leaders expected to attend. A 9-day mourning period is underway, and the Vatican is preparing to select a new pope, a process that could shape the Catholic Church's direction for decades. Francis's passing raises questions about the Church's future. Will his successor continue his inclusive legacy or pivot toward traditionalism? The global outpouring of grief, from China to the Americas, underscores his impact, but the transition comes at a time of geopolitical uncertainty. Elsewhere, the U.S.-China trade war is reshaping global alliances. China's state-backed funds are retreating from U.S. private equity investments, signaling a broader decoupling. Iran's top diplomat visited China on April 22nd, hinting at deepening ties as both nations navigate U.S. sanctions and tariffs. Meanwhile, expected talks between Iran and the U.S. offer a slim chance to curb Tehran's nuclear ambitions, though skepticism abounds about their success. In Europe, German police are expanding a manhunt after 2 Turkish men were fatally shot in a spa town north of Frankfurt, with suspects still at large. In the Middle East, an Israeli military investigation attributed the deaths of Palestinians to an operational misunderstanding, fueling tensions. These incidents highlight the fragility of global stability amid economic and political disruptions. Critical. Reflections and what's next. As we wrap up, let's reflect. The U.S. financial markets are grappling with uncertainty driven by Trump's tariffs and Fed tensions. Are these policies a strategic reset, or are they destabilizing the global economy? Politically, Trump's rapid-fire executive actions signal a transformative agenda, but at what cost to institutional integrity? Globally, Pope Francis's death marks the end of an era, while trade wars and regional conflicts underscore a world in flux. Looking ahead, watch for market reactions to tariff negotiations, particularly U.S.-China developments. The Vatican's conclave to select a new pope will be a focal point, as will Iran's nuclear talks. These stories are interconnected. Economic instability can fuel political unrest, and global leadership transitions can shift diplomatic priorities. Thank you for joining me for this report. Stay informed, question the narratives, and keep an eye on how these events unfold. This is Natasha, signing off.